Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar weekly discussion topic video. As you can see from the title, this one is going to be all about Azula. But before I get into the discussion on Azula, I do just want to basically explain a video that didn't go up during the week that I kind of said I would do, and that is a review of the Avatar The Last Airbender poster collection, which was released on Wednesday. Now, the reason I didn't get a review up of this is because I was actually unable to get the book this week. None of the stores I went to actually had it, or when I got there they were sold out. I don't actually know. But I do have the book ordered from Amazon, and so I'll review the book when it arrives, but that realistically probably won't be until for another 2 or 3 weeks, but I will review it when it gets here. Thankfully, it is a piece of merchandise that I don't think requires a crazy in-depth review, in that it is just a poster book, and it was made up for, I think, during the week when I did get one of the first early reviews out for Smoke and Shadow Part 1, so getting to read that book was a big surprise for me this week, and just getting that review out in kind of place of that poster collection was definitely a kind of a cool thing during the week. But for now, let's get into Azula. She has been the most requested discussion topic since I started this video and opened up, the idea of you guys suggesting topics to me. And even before I started this weekly discussion series, she was still really requested that I do some sort of a kind of preview video establishing where Azula is as a character heading into Smoke and Shadow. So for sure in this video I will be covering the kind of theories going into Smoke and Shadow, but what I also want to do is just kind of get across who her character is before that. How does her character start out? How does it develop to the point where we meet her in, say, The Search, and her journey in The Search leading her to where she's going to be in Smoke and Shadow? So I think there's a good journey to cover with her as a character. So I think I'll start off with just the fact that she is one of the most kind of fan favorite characters out there. She's definitely the highest ranked, I would consider, among the fandom of all of the villains in the show. She definitely beats out all of the Avatar The Last Airbender villains, and I think in general most of the core villains as well. So she, for most people, is the best villain that the series has had. And the main reason for that is that she's more complex than all of the Avatar The Last Airbender villains, and I think a lot of the core villains are comparable. But Avatar just kind of, her story there connects her to so many other important characters, and she is very important as a villain throughout the kind of entire series, basically. So I think that's why she ends up winning out. And in addition to that, she has that villainous personality that I think people really attach themselves to, that she is a powerful female character, she's a powerful female villain, who is the sister of Zuko, the daughter of Fire Lord Ozai, yet she is super powerful herself, both in terms of her personality as well as her bending skills. And so the first part of this video is basically going to be covering her base personality plus her basically bending techniques and stuff like that. So her personality is basically all about control. She controls people through fear, through manipulation, and just through basically exerting her kind of status on people. The fact that she is from royalty, she's a princess of the Fire Nation, and she just has so much confidence in herself that she can basically control any situation going in there, because she knows that she was born into royalty. This was her destiny, this is what she was born for, whereas not everyone she meets, is even people in really powerful positions, comes from that. And I think her interactions with Long Feng demonstrate that perfectly. This was a guy who did some amazing things himself, going from just some random guy growing up in the middle ring of the city to eventually becoming the Grand Secretariat of Ba Sing Se and controlling the city to a point where the biggest city in the world didn't know about the 100-year war. That is a huge accomplishment in terms of his leadership and what he managed to do. But Azula, just in a couple of episodes, managed to take over his group, the Dai Li, that he had controlled and were so loyal to him, just with kind of the sheer force of her personality. And I think that scene perfectly demonstrates who she is. You know, Long Feng and Azula are similar villains in terms of, you know, how they approach things. They're not all about the fighting, though both can fight. They more try to exert their dominance over people through control. But Azula's control was just so much better than Long Feng's, and to the point where she even says, you know, in this game, you were never even a player. That's how little she thought of him and how much confidence she actually had in herself. And, you know, so straight away she has that personality that people can attach themselves to because she's so powerful as a villain. She thinks herself better than everyone and can control people. And as we'll get into over the course of this video, you can see straight away the flaws in her personality, in that how does she react when she can't control something, when she can't control people, when they experience emotions that are more powerful than fear, and how does she adapt to, you know, not having control over people and stuff like that. So it's really interesting that she has these flaws. The show never like hits you over the head with this is a villain with flaws, but you can see deep down that she has them. But she makes up so much for these things with just her sheer physical, you know, fighting skills and techniques and stuff like that. And with Azula, she is established as one of the most powerful benders in the show, not just firebenders, for sure one of the most powerful benders. And for someone who's like 14 when we first meet her, you know, going on 15 and is like 16, nearly 17 in the comics now, she is exceptionally powerful. She has complete mastery of lightning generation. She's one of the quickest characters able to do that. And most importantly and most unique to her, she has an ability that no other firebender has been shown to be able to use, and that is the ability to bend blue fire. Now, Mike and Brian have explained this before as kind of like, yeah, there's kind of reasons for it, but primarily we did it just to, in an artistic sense, show a difference between Azula and Zuko's fire, make it look really cool when they fight. But the reason really is just that blue fire, in terms of scientific fact, is hotter, more powerful, more intense than kind of standard orange, red, yellow fire. And so that basically tells us that Azula, in terms of her personality, has so much control over her techniques that she can actually make her firebending hotter than anyone else and bend blue fire as easily as other people could bend normal fire. Because we saw in the past, in some of the flashbacks with Azula, that originally she could only bend kind of orange standard fire, what we call. And obviously they reached a point, she's established to be a firebending prodigy, that she managed to just realize that, like, I can control this, I can make this even more powerful than anyone else and still control it. So it's a technique that we have not seen anyone use, even in Korra, which has established a lot of really powerful bending techniques. We have still seen no one else bend blue fire, so it really just helps to kind of keep Azula strong as a character, that she's the only one we know able to do this technique. And we assume that, you know, other firebenders, if they're powerful enough, could turn their flames into blue if they wanted to, but would they be skilled enough in control to actually use it effectively? That's where Azula's, you know, real skill comes out. It's just that she's so, you know, in control that she can do it. The other thing with her blue fire is obviously that it kind of visually represents her kind of personality, in that she's kind of cold, she doesn't show a lot of emotion, and so it really creates this difference just kind of symbolically with her and Zuko, where Zuko is this huge, just you know, orange, yellow, red flames all over the place, and because he kind of wears his heart on his sleeve and stuff like that, whereas she is just blue and cool, calm, collected, which again it creates a really interesting contrast, because she is the character so much in control, yet she's also the character that over the course of her journey in the show loses the most control and ends up kind of so far kind of gone that she's kind of mentally unstable and is not in control at all, though she can still bend really well. So her skills are really amazing, and so you can really understand the base personality, where it comes from and stuff like that. But for me, I like the villainous side of her personality and stuff like that. I like her as a villain, but why I would rate her highly myself as a character is because she is a character. She's not just a villain. Because of her connection and who she's related to, she becomes an interesting character because she is also the daughter of Ursa as well. And you start asking the question, how did these two kids in the royal family turn out so different? Like, they are complete opposites of each other, basically. What I like about Azula is just that she has these kind of complex questions about her, like, how did she turn out the way she is? And I think most importantly, that she is a villain who you can feel sympathy for when she's defeated. That even though she's done all this bad stuff, which for sure shouldn't be forgotten about, and that she deserves to pay for the crimes that she has committed, but you do feel sorry to see this, 14, 15-year-old girl mentally broken at the end of the series, not knowing at all what to do. And we've seen little bits of these issues that she actually has. So that's what I'm going to discuss next. It's just how Azula turned out the way she did. How such a strong and powerful character with basically one of the strongest personalities was actually a character whose personality broke in the series, and why that happened. And it all goes back to, I suppose, the kind of history of the Fire Nation royal family. And the fact that, okay, Ursa and Ozai was an arranged marriage. They had 2 kids, Zuko first, then Azula. And basically what happened was that once Ozai found out that, okay, they're both firebenders, he basically saw that Zuko wasn't really the prodigal, amazing firebender that he thought he would be, and switched all of his attention to Azula, who was very quickly realizing her potential and showing that she was a prodigal firebender, able to do these techniques earlier than anyone else and stuff like that. So you can see straight away the issue in the Fire Nation family here, that Ozai thought that Zuko was not good enough, and so didn't focus on him at all, and put all of his attention into basically raising Azula. And so Ursa, to kind of make up for this, had to give all of her attention more or less to Zuko, because he wasn't getting anything from his father, and his father was actually fairly, I suppose, kind of abusive, not in the kind of obvious way, like he's hitting Zuko or anything like that, but just kind of not caring about Zuko at all, only focusing on Azula. And so you can see this split that happened at a certain point in this family, again caused by the bending, and it's similar in a way to kind of Tarlok and Noatok and what happened there, but kind of slightly different circumstances here. So you have it that Azula was raised almost completely by Ozai, and especially once the whole Ursa situation happened and she was banished, left, she didn't have that mother figure at all in her life to be any sort of a good influence on her as she was kind of developing and growing up. Whereas Zuko, basically abandoned by Ozai most of his life, is a fundamentally good person deep down, and the few little bits of Ozai that kind of came through are the bits that create so much drama in his life. So you can see exactly where these things come from, but also the fact that Azula does actually care that her mother, she didn't really have much kind of focus from her mother. And it's one of these things where you can't really blame Ursa completely for this whole situation. We know from the search that Ursa realizes that her not being there for Azula did kind of cause some of these issues, but at the same time it was Ozai who made Azula who she was, that he raised her, yes, as a daughter, but more so as a tool for gaining more power, that he would have this basic, henchwoman, I suppose, that he could just send out to do the things that he didn't want to do, and he had complete control over because she was his daughter. And you can see that that's basically all she's raised for. She's raised to be a really powerful firebender, a good kind of leader, commander, able to manipulate and take control of any situation needed and adapt to this kind of war situation. But he didn't seem to teach her any sort of normal people skills, how to make friends, how to keep friends, and just how to adapt and react to things going on. And that's why ultimately the biggest event in terms of Azula's kind of mental down spiral is Mei and Ty Lee's quote-unquote betrayal of her, which, you know, we call it a betrayal, but really all it was them basically realizing that she is not really acting as a friend to them. She is treating them as like soldiers, and like, you have to be loyal to me regardless of what I do. I assume there was a friendship between the three of them before. They mentioned that they went to the same kind of academy together, but obviously when Ozai really began to focus on her, it changed her, and the friendship that she had with kind of Mei and Ty Lee did turn into this more controlling type situation, and she saw them as basically kind of tools that she could use. That's what she's basically learned from her father, that people are just these things you can use if you control them in the correct way. And the easiest way to do that is to play on their fears. So she basically threatens Ty Lee to leave the circus and kind of join her, basically. Mei is just kind of just bored when we meet her, so she kind of joins up in the first place anyway. But what ends up turning the two of them against her is that Azula kind of can't understand that there's anything more powerful than the emotion of fear, that nothing will be more powerful than that, and so nothing will break her control over them. But what actually happens is that Mei realizes that she loves Zuko more than she fears Azula, and so she is able to kind of break out of that and turn against Azula, and then Mei and Ty Lee are actually really close friends, and so Ty Lee kind of joins Mei and kind of realizes that this is the opportunity, because in that whole trio dynamic, you can see that Ty Lee does admire Azula a lot and look up to how kind of powerful as a woman she is, I suppose. But she can see at that moment that Azula isn't really being a friend to her, and so that is such a big moment, that it's just this control broken, that she's had these friends her whole life basically, and suddenly they've betrayed her, and she couldn't do anything about it. That she couldn't do anything more powerful than the way they felt at that moment. Mei for Zuko, and I suppose Ty Lee for Mei. So that is such a big moment for her, because you could sense throughout it that she is really unable to comprehend why this happened or really understand it, and she begins to lose it there. And then just especially like with all these encounters with Zuko, he's becoming more and more confident and not kind of backing down so much around her. You can really see her just losing control of so much stuff just because one thing goes wrong, and she's not able to adapt to it because she doesn't have the other skills to like do things. Like, she just doesn't know how to be proper friends with people, and this is demonstrated in the beach episode, I think, very effectively, where Azula is in this position where she just has to act like a normal teenager, like what she is, like 14, 15 years old, and she doesn't know how to do it. She likes this guy, but doesn't know how to like approach him, interact at all. So she does something that's kind of seemingly out of character, but it shows this kind of vulnerability, this kind of weakness in her that we hadn't seen up to now. And that is that she asks Ty Lee to basically give her advice on how to flirt with boys, because she realizes that Ty Lee knows about this sort of thing and she doesn't. So it's something that she's admitting that she doesn't know, but that she kind of wants to do. So you can see this kind of want from her at a kind of base level to be more normal, but she doesn't know how to do it because of the way she kind of grew up, being so focused on, you have to be my second in command in terms of getting the Fire Nation victory in this war and so on. And then also in that episode, we get the other kind of hint that there's more there than just Azula the villain. When they're all talking around the campfire about their kind of issues in their lives, they come to Azula and she kind of dismisses it. She's kind of like, oh, this was a great performance, everyone, but I'm not like that, And then just inadvertently it just kind of slips out that, I don't even care about what my mother thinks, even though she thought I was a monster. And she kind of stops herself there before she kind of actually does get emotional. But just her saying that is such a big moment in the series, because you can see that it really did affect her. She is affected by what happened with their mother. The fact that for her, most of the stuff she remembers about Ursa is her mother kind of considering her a monster. And now that we haven't seen a lot of flashbacks, we know that Ursa does love Azula. We see that in the kind of flashbacks that expand on certain scenes from ATLA, that when Ursa said goodbye to Zuko, when she left, it seemed like she only said goodbye to Zuko, but the comics established that she did also go to Azula when Azula was asleep and say goodbye to her, that she did deeply care for both of them. But Zuko kind of needed her so much at that point because Ozai was so focused on Azula. And so it's obviously a regret that Ursa has completely, but you could see that some of the scenes presented to us that Ursa had to be the one to kind of step in and go like, hey, like, you're just playing with kids here. You can't just do this sort of stuff. You can't just burn a doll because you don't like it and, talk so kind of brutally and cruelly about, Uncle Iroh's dead son and stuff like that. You can see these kind of mother kind of instincts kind of coming out from Ursa, that the way she's being raised here by Ozai is not proper stuff here. Like, she's not really learning how to kind of understand people here and understand that, hey, don't see the death of someone in our family as a positive because it means your father will get into a higher position. You should be upset at this because it's a member of our family. And you can see that Zuko's upset by the death of Lu Ten, but Azula isn't. And so you can see that the monster line wasn't really like this devastating emotional line that Ursa deeply kind of feared that Azula was just gone. It was just at that moment when she just kind of thought like, what are you doing saying that? Like, that's such an awful thing to say. So, but it had a big impact on Azula at that young age. And so you could see the issues with her mother kind of come out here, that she didn't have that mother figure that Zuko did have, and ultimately that's kind of why they do turn out so different. That Zuko cares about people because he cares about having these bonds with people. The people that he is loyal to, he will do anything for. That's his kind of personality. But with Azula, she only cared about people if they could do something for her. And that's something she's probably going to have to learn. Because, again, coming back to the Zuko-Azula comparison, they're so different. They're the exact opposites, basically. But also, in terms of their character arcs, Azula is kind of now in a position that Zuko was in at the start. So their roles have reversed, basically, now. Zuko has kind of control over his life kind of right now. He has his mother back. The only thing he doesn't really have control of is Azula, and doesn't know what's going on with her and wants to fix that relationship. Whereas Azula is now in a position similar to Zuko at the start of ATLA, where she doesn't have control. She doesn't know what she wants to do. She's just kind of following what she thinks needs to be done. She's kind of run off, not knowing what to do, but kind of still going ahead with Ozai's plan. And we don't know what she's thinking right now. And that's really interesting, because it presents Azula at this point in time, as far as we know, that she's a character who needs a kind of Iroh figure in her life, someone to guide her onto the right path. And now in Smoke and Shadow, we're not really sure what that's going to be. Zuko wants to fix the relationship with Azula, but has to protect his own family. And if she comes back and attacks his old family, he's going to have to fight Azula properly. And that's ultimately that big decision that's referenced in the Smoke and Shadow Part 3 Smoke and Shadow Part 3 preview description. That Zuko is going to have to make this big choice that may make him seem like Ozai. And I think it probably will have to do with, when it comes down to it, is he going to have to take out Azula because she is such a danger to herself and everyone else around her? Or is there any way to actually help her and kind of just calm her down, give her some control back in her life? Ultimately, what needs to happen is that she needs to realize, I think, that she needs people close to her who care about her, and just needs to, I suppose, understand the fact that she does need people, not just for control or anything like that, but she needs to be around people who she likes because she just likes being around them and so on. And part of that may be that she needs her big brother. Part of that may be that she does actually need her mother. And how exactly these scenes play out, what they try to do here, is going to be fascinating. Because in Smoke and Shadow, we obviously know that Zuko and Azula both have a kind of new half-sister in Ki, who gets on exceptionally well with Zuko. And in The Search, we saw that Azula was really kind of jealous. We saw this kind of mad jealousy from her around the fact that Zuko is so close with his new sister, but also the fact that Ursa had another daughter, and Azula takes this as, I wasn't good enough for you, you never loved me, so you went and had another daughter who would be the right way you wanted it, when that really wasn't the case. So I think Ki may actually prove to be a really important character for Azula, depending on if they interact or not. If you have this really powerful scene where Azula almost wants to hurt Ki, but Ki kind of realizes that this is my older sister here, and she tries to start this emotional connection. Ki kind of proves to Azula that she's not this villainous person. She is just a little girl who is her sister. There could be a really big connection there that kind of starts some things off, and I really do think that it has to be something on that really emotional, personal level that sparks something within Azula that kind of snaps her out of this madness. Whether that be her having this really big moment with Ursa, which I think is going to have to be something at some point. Whether it be Zuko doing something really important, or potentially Ki, or Norin even. They could even do something with Ozai. I think because as Ursa is set up to be to be a pretty important character in Smoke and Shadow, they could do something where Ursa and Ozai talk for the first time in ages and address what happened with their kids, and especially Azula. So she is in a fascinating spot right now as a character, because she is the most major character who has such a huge gap in terms of her story, her character arc, and it's going to be fascinating to see what they do with her. All we know right now is that they're going to basically introduce Azula into Smoke and Shadow as a kind of a threat. We don't know the full details on what book she appears in, or how exactly she comes back, where she was, but that when she comes back, she is going to be somewhat of a threat, and she is going to kind of inadvertently force Zuko to do something to deal with her. And that is going to be a really important confrontation when it comes up. So, she's definitely one of the things I'm most interested in going into Smoke and Shadow. Again, I'm not referencing anything I learned about Azula from Smoke and Shadow Part 1 here, because I don't want to give any spoilers away. But all I'll say is that Azula is... I'm not going to say if she's in the book or not in Part 1, but she is referenced a few times by certain characters. So they, at their very least, are setting stuff up in Part 1, and they're going to introduce her at some point. But that's basically all I want to say here about Azula. She is a fascinating character. I could probably do a video double this length on her character alone, but I think I covered the key parts that I wanted to here. That she went from being this extremely in control character who is both powerful in personality and physically, to being a character who's still really powerful but has lost all control. And I think it does come back to the fact that Ozai did not teach her. She never learned at a young age the kind of important lessons about kind of learning to connect properly with others and the importance of, you know, your bonds with people, including her family. And I think family is going to be a really big thing in this story, because May and her family is also a big deal. And it's also going to be a book that, you know, it addresses these kind of issues like basically, are Mei and Zuko going to get back together? Is that going to be like the start of a new family, kind of, basically? But yeah, I'm going to end the video there. In the comments, definitely leave some thoughts on what I've said in this video. And if you have a suggestion for another discussion topic for like next week or the week after that or something, definitely leave that as well. But other than that, that has been the weekly discussion video. Thanks for listening, and bye.